The amber vine had never felt so suffocating. Seren adjusted the hem of her emerald dress for the 5th time, her fingers trembling against the delicate fabric as she scanned the crowded restaurant. Crystal chandeliers cast honeyed light across marble floors, and the murmur of conversation blended with the soft melody drifting from a piano in the corner. She should not have come. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished silver of her water glass. Brown hair swept into a careful twist. Minimal jewelry. The dress her sister had insisted made her eyes look like forest pools. "He is perfect for you," Mira had promised. Handsome, successful. From one of the old families. This could change everything, Seren. Everything. That word had been enough to make her agree. At 24, Seren had watched every female in her circle find their mates while she remained unclaimed, unmarked. The whispers followed her through the streets of Volanthos like shadows. Defective, cursed, unworthy. Perhaps they were right. The chair across from her scraped against the floor, and Seren's heart launched into her throat. He was handsome. That much was undeniable. Sharp features, pale blue eyes, dark hair slicked back with obvious care. His suit probably cost more than she earned in 3 months at the apothecary. "Seren, I presume?" His voice carried the bored drawl of someone who had already decided this encounter was beneath him. "Yes. You must be Dorian." She offered her hand. "It is lovely to meet." He did not take it. Instead, his gaze traveled down her body with the detachment of a man inspecting livestock at auction. His lips pressed into a thin line. Something cold flickered behind his eyes. "My cousin failed to mention several details." Dorian settled into his chair without removing his coat. "How old are you?" 24. "And still unclaimed." It was not a question. Fascinating. The word dripped with derision. Heat crept up Seren's neck. The mate bond cannot be forced. It happens when fate decides. Dorian laughed, and the sound drew glances from nearby tables. "Yes, I have heard the poetry. But we both know what it means when a female reaches your age without a single alpha showing interest." Seren's hands curled into fists beneath the tablecloth. "Perhaps I have simply been selective." "Selective." He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Is that what we are calling it now?" A waiter approached, and Dorian ordered wine without consulting her. The most expensive bottle on the menu. He made a show of swirling it, sniffing it, savoring the first sip while Seren sat frozen. "I am going to be honest with you," Dorian said, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "My family pressured me into this arrangement. Something about building bridges with the lower merchant class." "Lower." The word landed like a slap. "I had hoped," he continued, examining his manicured nails, "that you might at least be pleasant to look at. But this—" He gestured at her with a dismissive wave. "The dress is trying too hard. The hair is provincial. And those eyes, they are not forest pools, darling. They are mud puddles." Laughter erupted from a table of young nobles nearby. They had been listening. Of course they had been listening. Seren felt the burn of tears threatening to spill. Her wolf, the quiet presence that had never fully awakened inside her, whimpered with shared humiliation. "I should go," she whispered, reaching for her purse. "Yes, you should." Dorian did not even look at her. "Tell your sister that the next time she wishes to waste my evening, she should at least send someone who—" "Enough." The voice came from behind her, deep, commanding, laced with an authority that made every wolf in the restaurant instinctively lower their eyes. Seren turned, and the most powerful alpha she had ever seen rose from the table directly beside hers. He was not merely handsome, he was devastating. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell in careless waves across a forehead made for crowns. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, shadowed with the hint of stubble, But it was his eyes that stole the breath from Seren's lungs, golden, burning like twin flames in the candlelight, and they were fixed on Dorian with barely contained fury. "I believe," the stranger said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through Seren's chest, "that the lady asked to leave." Dorian's face cycled through confusion, then recognition, then pure terror in the span of 2 heartbeats. The color drained from his cheeks. His wineglass slipped, splattering crimson across the white tablecloth. I did not realize. My lord, I had no idea you were. Clearly." The stranger stepped closer, and Seren watched Dorian shrink back like a pup facing a dire wolf. "What I witnessed was a male with more arrogance than sense publicly humiliating a female who agreed to meet him in good faith. It was merely conversation, a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding." The golden eyes narrowed. "Then you will have no objection to apologizing. On your knees." The restaurant had gone silent. Every eye watched, every ear strained. Dorian's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. "Surely you cannot expect—" "I do not expect." The stranger smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who had already won. "I command." Something in his voice shifted. Power radiated from him in waves, pressing against Seren's skin like the heat from a bonfire. Her wolf, dormant for so long, suddenly stirred. Not with fear. With something else entirely. Dorian's knees hit the marble floor with a crack that echoed through the hushed room. "Forgive me," he choked out, his eyes fixed on the ground. "I spoke out of turn. I was cruel and thoughtless, and I beg your pardon." The words were directed at Seren, but his gaze never rose to meet hers. He was terrified, trembling. Whatever authority this stranger wielded, it was absolute. "Leave," the stranger commanded, "and if I ever hear of you treating any female with such disrespect again, I will ensure your family name becomes a cautionary tale." Dorian scrambled to his feet and fled without looking back. The heavy doors of the amber vine slammed behind him, and slowly the restaurant returned to its murmur of conversation. But Seren could not move. The stranger turned to her, and the fury in his expression melted into something softer, warmer. His golden eyes traced her face with an intensity that made her pulse stutter. "Are you all right?" The gentleness in his voice broke something loose in her chest. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "You should not listen to anything that fool said." He reached out, and his fingers brushed a tear from her cheek that she had not realized had fallen. "He is blind, and stupid, and clearly incapable of recognizing beauty when it sits before him." His touch sent electricity cascading down her spine. Her wolf surged forward with a keening sound that resonated in her very bones. What was happening? "I am Kale," he said softly. "Will you allow me to escort you home? The streets of Valanthos can be dangerous after dark." Seren should have refused. Should have thanked him politely and walked away. Should have protected what remained of her shattered dignity. Instead, she heard herself whisper, "Yes." The smile that transformed his face was worth every moment of humiliation that had preceded it. Neither of them noticed the hooded figure watching from the shadowed corner of the restaurant, nor the way cold eyes followed their departure with calculating interest. But by morning, the entire kingdom would know that the Alpha King had been seen leaving the amber vine with an unclaimed female from the merchant class, and those who had spent years positioning themselves for his throne would not let such a development go unanswered. The night air was cool against Seren's flushed cheeks as they walked through the lamplit streets of the upper district. Kale moved beside her with a fluid grace that seemed almost unnatural. Every step was measured, controlled, as if he was constantly aware of everything around him while simultaneously focused entirely on her. "You are quiet," he observed. "I hope I did not overstep." "Overstep?" Seren laughed softly. You saved me from the most humiliating experience of my life. If anything, I owe you a debt I cannot repay." "There is no debt." His voice was firm. "What that male did was unconscionable. You deserved none of it." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment. The streets grew narrower, the shops more modest, as they approached the merchant quarter where Seren lived. "May I ask you something?" she ventured. "Anything." "Why did you intervene? A stranger's blind date gone wrong hardly seems worthy of a lord's attention." Kale stopped walking. Seren turned to face him, confused by the sudden tension in his posture. The golden flames in his eyes had intensified, burning with something that looked almost like pain. "You truly do not know who I am." It was not a question. "You said your name is Kale. Beyond that." She shrugged helplessly. "I apologize if I should recognize you. I do not attend court functions." A strange sound escaped him, half laugh, half something darker. "Seren." The way he spoke her name sent shivers across her skin. "I am Kale Aldrathan, AlphaKing of Valanthos." The world tilted beneath her feet. AlphaKing. She was standing in a darkened street with the AlphaKing, who had just forced a noble to his knees on her behalf. "That is not possible," she breathed. And yet. Why would the AlphaKing be dining alone at the Amber Vine? Why would he involve himself in a commoner's failed courtship? Why would he walk her home through the merchant quarter like a male who felt something the moment he saw you? Kale stepped closer, and her back met the cold stone of a building behind her. Like an alpha whose wolf recognized something in you that defies explanation. Like a king who suddenly understands why no other female has ever stirred his heart. Seren's breath came in shallow gasps. This was madness. This was impossible. This was... I felt it too, she whispered before she could stop herself. Kale's eyes flared with golden fire. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw with devastating tenderness. "Then you understand why I cannot walk away from you tonight. Why I need to see you again. Why every instinct I possess is screaming that you are... my king." The voice shattered the moment like a stone through glass. A male stepped from the shadows. Tall, silver-haired, with the bearing of a warrior and the expression of someone delivering grave news. "Corvin?" Kale did not release her face. "I gave explicit instructions not to be disturbed." "I know, my king. But the situation is urgent." The male's eyes flicked to Seren, then away. "The Council of Elders has convened an emergency session. Lady Seraphina of House Morthane has arrived in the capital. They are demanding your presence immediately." Seren felt Kale's entire body go rigid. "Seraphina," she repeated. The name tasted like poison on her tongue. "Who is Seraphina?" Kale closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the golden flames had dimmed to something that looked like despair. She is the female I have been betrothed to since birth. The alliance between our houses was sealed before I could walk." His voice was hollow. "The council has set our wedding date for 6 weeks from now." 6 weeks. Seren stepped back, breaking the contact between them. The cold rushed in where his warmth had been, and it felt like drowning. "I see." Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "Then I wish you happiness in your union, my king." "Seren, wait." But she was already walking away. Already fleeing down the darkened street toward her small apartment above the apothecary. Already telling herself that whatever she had felt was merely a moment of madness, a trick of candlelight and heightened emotion. She did not look back. She did not see the way Kale watched her go with devastation carved into every line of his face. She did not hear the vow he whispered into the night. "I will find a way, Seren. I swear it on my blood and my crown. This is not where our story ends." And she certainly did not notice the hooded figure from the restaurant, now standing on a nearby rooftop, already composing the message that would be delivered to Lady Seraphina before dawn. The AlphaKing had found his true mate. and House Morthane would do whatever it took to ensure she never lived long enough to claim him. 3 days passed before Seren saw him again. She had convinced herself that their encounter was a fever dream, that the Alpha King had not truly looked at her, as if she were the answer to a question he had been asking his entire life. That her wolf had not howled with recognition the moment his fingers touched her skin. Then she found him waiting in the alley behind the apothecary at midnight. "You should not be here," she whispered, even as her traitorous heart soared at the sight of him. Kale stepped from the shadows, and the moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face. He looked different from the polished noble who had risen from that restaurant table. Worn, desperate, as if the 3 days apart had cost him something vital. "I have tried to stay away." His voice was rough. "I have attended council meetings and smiled at Seraphina and pretended that my entire being is not consumed by thoughts of you. Then perhaps you should try harder." "I cannot." He moved closer, and Seren found herself backing against the weathered brick of her building. "Believe me, Seren. I have fought wars. I have buried my father. I have carried the weight of a kingdom since I was 19 years old. But I cannot fight this." His hand found hers in the darkness. The contact sent sparks racing up her arm. "What is this?" she breathed. "I believe it is the mate bond." Kale's golden eyes searched her face. "The true bond, the kind that appears once in a generation, if the old stories are to be believed. The mate bond." Seren had grown up hearing tales of the sacred connection between destined pairs, how it transcended politics and bloodlines, how it could not be denied without destroying both wolves involved. "But you are betrothed," she said weakly. "An arrangement made by my father before my birth. It holds no claim over my heart. The council will have to accept that their king has found his true mate." Kale brought her hand to his chest, pressing her palm flat against the thundering beat beneath. "Feel that. My heart has not raced like this since I was a boy facing my first hunt. You have awakened something in me that I thought was dead, Seren." She should have pulled away. Should have reminded him of his duty, his station, the impossible gulf between a merchant's daughter and a king. Instead, she leaned into him and let herself believe. The weeks that followed were stolen moments woven between the threads of their separate lives. He came to her in darkness, scaling the wall to her tiny apartment above the apothecary like a lovesick youth, rather than the most powerful alpha in the realm. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. He told her of the loneliness that came with a crown. She told him of the shame that came with being unclaimed. "You were never unclaimed," he murmured one night, his lips brushing her temple. "You were waiting. We both were." On the 14th night, beneath a canopy of stars on the rooftop where no one could see them, Kale asked permission to mark her. "The claiming bite," he explained, his voice trembling with restrained need. "It will seal the bond between us. Make it unbreakable. Even if the council tries to force the marriage to Seraphina, they cannot override a true mate bond that has been physically claimed." Seren's pulse raced. "Where?" His fingers traced down her side, coming to rest on her hip just above the curve of her waist. "Here. Where only I will ever see it. Where it will remain our secret until I can announce you to the kingdom as my queen." "When?" she whispered. "The council meets in 3 weeks to finalize the wedding arrangements. I will reveal the bond then. I will show them the mark and invoke the ancient law that places a true mate above all political alliances." He cupped her face in his hands. "I will choose you, Seren. Before my court and my kingdom. I will choose you." She believed him. When his teeth sank into her hip, the pain was fleeting. What followed was an explosion of sensation that left her gasping. She felt him pour into her through the wound, his essence, his soul, his undying devotion. And in return, she gave him everything she had. Seren did not tell him about the other secret. The one she discovered 5 days later when the village midwife confirmed what her missed cycle and morning nausea had suggested. She was carrying the Alpha King's child. She would tell him after the council meeting, she decided. After he announced their bond. After the immediate danger had passed. She had no way of knowing that she would never get the chance. The night of the council meeting, Seren dressed in her finest gown and waited. Kale had arranged for Corvin, his most trusted beta, to escort her to the palace through a hidden entrance. She would wait in the antechamber adjacent to the Great Hall. When Kale revealed the mate bond, Corvin would bring her forward to stand beside her king. Her hands trembled as she touched the mark on her hip. It had healed into a beautiful silver scar, warm against her fingertips. Through it, she could feel Kale's presence like a second heartbeat. Strong, steady, unwavering. Tonight, everything would change. The palace corridors were deserted as Corvin led her through passages she had never known existed. The great hall's massive doors loomed before them, and beyond, Seren could hear the murmur of assembled nobles. "Wait here," Corvin instructed, guiding her into a small alcove hidden behind a tapestry. "When the king calls for you, I will come." She nodded, too nervous to speak. Through a gap in the heavy fabric, Seren could see a sliver of the proceedings. The hall was packed with wolves from every noble house in Valanthos. Candlelight blazed from 1,000 fixtures, and on the raised dais at the far end, Kale sat upon the throne of his ancestors. Beside him stood Seraphina of House Morthane. Even from this distance, Seren could see that the woman was stunning. Hair like liquid silver cascading down her back. A gown of ice-blue silk that seemed to glow against her porcelain skin. Features so perfectly symmetrical, they might have been carved by a master sculptor. Seren's hand moved instinctively to her belly. The High Elder rose, his ancient voice cutting through the chatter. "We are gathered to witness the formal announcement of the union between Alpha King Kale Aldrathan and Lady Seraphina of House Morthane." No, this was wrong. Kale was supposed to stop this. He was supposed to reveal the mate bond, invoke the ancient law, and choose her. Seren pressed closer to the gap in the tapestry, searching for any sign of the plan in motion. What she saw made her blood freeze. Kale sat motionless on the throne, his posture rigid, and his movements mechanical. His golden eyes, usually so vibrant, seemed flat, distant, empty. Something was wrong. "Alpha King," the High Elder continued, "do you accept Lady Seraphina as your chosen mate, to rule beside you until your final breath?" "Say no." Seren's fingernails bit into her palms. "Please, Kale. Say no." Kale rose from the throne. His gait was strange, puppet-like, as if invisible strings controlled his limbs. "I accept," he said, and his voice was hollow as a tomb. "Lady Seraphina will be my queen." The hall erupted in cheers, but Seren heard none of it. Her mark exploded with searing pain. She doubled over, a scream tearing from her throat as liquid fire consumed her hip. It felt as if his teeth were being ripped from her flesh, as if the bond itself was being shredded. Through tear-blurred eyes, she watched Kale take Seraphina's hand, watched him raise it to his lips, watched the woman smile with cold triumph, while the man Seren loved showed no emotion at all. He did not search the crowd for her. He did not hesitate. He did not seem to remember she existed. The blind date humiliation flashed through her mind, the same public shame, the same cruel dismissal. But this was infinitely worse, because this time she had believed. This time she had given him everything. A sob escaped her. Behind the tapestry, hidden from the celebrating crowd, Seren pressed her hand to her belly where his child grew. She had been a fool twice over. The sound of footsteps made her spin. Corvin stood in the shadows, his face pale with shock. "My lady, I do not understand. This was not the plan. The king was supposed to choose me?" Seren's laugh was bitter, broken. Apparently he changed his mind. "No. Something is wrong. His eyes, his voice. That is not. But Seren was already running. She fled through the hidden passages, through servants' corridors, through the back gates of the palace. The winter wind bit at her tear-streaked cheeks. The mark on her hip continued to burn with relentless agony. She did not stop until she reached her apartment. She did not pack much. A few dresses. Her mother's ring. The herbs she had gathered to ease the morning sickness that had begun plaguing her. At the window she paused. Below, the celebration bonfires were being lit across the capital. Somewhere in that palace, Kale was accepting congratulations for his wise political choice. Serafina was probably already planning their wedding night. And Seren was disappearing into darkness with his heir growing in her womb. She pressed her hand to the cold glass. "Goodbye, my king," she whispered. "I hope she makes you happy." Then she pulled her cloak tight and vanished through the back streets of Volanthos, swallowed by the winter night. She did not see Kale's bedroom window burst open high above. She did not see the golden eyes that flickered with sudden desperate awareness. And she did not hear the howl of anguish that split the sky moments later, a sound so raw and broken that wolves across the kingdom lifted their heads in shared grief. By the time Kale reached her empty apartment, Seren was already gone. 4 months had passed since the night Seren fled Volanthos. The village of Ashwin sat nestled in a valley 3 kingdoms away, so remote that news from the capital took weeks to arrive. It was a place where people minded their own affairs and asked few questions of strangers. It was exactly what Seren needed. She had arrived in the bitter heart of winter, claiming to be a widow named Syrah, whose husband had died in a border skirmish. The village healer had recently passed, and Ashwin desperately needed someone with knowledge of herbs and medicine. Seren's skills with the apothecary trade made her invaluable. Within weeks, she had become simply the healer woman who lived in the cottage by the river. Now spring was fighting its way through the last stubborn patches of snow, and Seren's belly had grown round with the life inside her. The village midwife, a kind elderly woman named Bridget, had examined her 3 times and each time made the same observation. "You are carrying more than one blessing, dear. The size, the way they move, I would wager my best laying hen that there are twins in there." Twins. Seren tried not to think about what that meant, tried not to imagine 2 children with their father's golden eyes, asking questions she could not answer. At night, she lay awake with her hands on her belly, feeling the kicks that came from opposite sides at once. Her wolf, still quiet after all these years, stirred with maternal instinct that surprised her. "You are strong," she whispered to the darkness. "Strong like your father." The thought of Kale still sent pain lancing through her chest. 4 months, and the wound had not begun to heal. The mark on her hip should have faded by now. Among wolf kind, rejection severed the bond completely. The scar should have disappeared within weeks, leaving only smooth skin and bitter memories. Instead, it pulsed with warmth that kept her awake. It ached when the wind blew from the east, from the direction of Volanthos. And sometimes, late at night, she swore she felt something through it. A presence, a searching, a desperate, clawing need. But that was impossible. Kale had chosen Serafina before the entire kingdom. The bond between them should have dissolved the moment he spoke those words, unless the bond had never truly been broken at all. Seren pushed the thought away. False hope was a poison more dangerous than any she knew how to brew. A knock at her cottage door pulled her from her thoughts. Young Tamsin, the baker's son, stood on her threshold with flour still dusting his cheeks. His eyes were wide with excitement. "Mistress Sarah, travelers have come from the east. They bring news from Volanthos." Seren gripped the doorframe as the ground seemed to shift beneath her. "What news?" "The AlphaKing." Tamsin bounced on his heels. "They say he has gone mad. He has torn apart half the kingdom searching for someone. A woman. No one knows who she is, only that the king will destroy anything that stands between him and finding her." "Mad?" she managed. Tamsin nodded vigorously. The travelers say the crops have failed in 3 provinces. Wolves have turned feral, attacking livestock in broad daylight. The king's own guard has been sent to villages across every allied territory, questioning everyone, searching every house. Searching for what? For her. Whoever she is, the king has offered 50,000 gold pieces for information leading to her discovery. And they say... The boy lowered his voice conspiratorially. They say the wedding to Lady Seraphina never happened. The king threw her from his chambers the morning after the announcement and has refused to see her since. The wedding never happened. Seren's knees threatened to buckle. Thank you, Tamsin. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. Tell your father I will bring the salve for his hands tomorrow. After the boy left, Seren sank into her chair with trembling legs. He was searching for her. But why? Why would Kale tear his kingdom apart for a woman he had publicly rejected? Why would he cancel a wedding that secured the most powerful political alliance in a generation? Unless something had been wrong that night. Unless the emptiness in his eyes had been something other than indifference. Movement outside her window caught her attention. Serene's breath stopped. A shape stood at the edge of the forest across the river. Large, 4-legged, dark fur catching the last light of day. A wolf. As she watched, frozen with terror, another emerged beside it. Then another. 4 massive wolves, their amber eyes fixed on her cottage with an intelligence that was anything but animal. They had found her. The mark on Serene's hip exploded with heat. She gasped, stumbling away from the window as pain radiated through her body. This was nothing like the dull warmth she had grown accustomed to. This was searing, overwhelming, as if molten iron had been pressed against her flesh. And beneath the pain, she felt something else. A presence, vast and desperate, pushing against the edges of her consciousness. Her babies kicked violently, movements coming from both sides at once. No, Seren breathed, both hands flying to her belly. No, no, no. He was close. Not just his wolves, him. And Seren had nowhere left to run. Seren's eyes darted around her small cottage, calculating escape routes. The back door led to the forest, but if wolves were already watching, they would run her down before she made it 50 yards. The root cellar was hidden beneath a rug, but a wolf's nose would find her within minutes. She was trapped. A heavy knock shook the front door. Seren's heart stopped. The wolves she had seen were in their animal forms. They could not knock. Which meant someone in human form stood on her threshold. Another knock, more insistent. Mistress Sarah? A male voice, vaguely familiar. Please open the door. We mean you no harm. Seren laughed bitterly at that. Wolves who hunted a pregnant woman across 3 kingdoms meant her no harm. How reassuring. But she had no choice. Running was impossible. Hiding was futile. And if she did not open the door willingly, they would simply break it down. She grabbed the iron fire poker from beside her hearth and moved toward the door. When she opened it, 3 men stood on her threshold. 2 were clearly warriors, their massive frames and alert postures marking them as royal guard. But it was the 3rd man who made Serene's breath catch. Silver hair, weathered face, the bearing of a wolf who had seen decades of service. Corvin, she breathed. The beta's eyes flooded with relief. My lady. Thank the moon. We have been searching for so long. I am not your lady. Seren kept the poker raised. I am no one. A widow. A healer. Nothing more. You are Seren, formerly of the merchant district of Valanthos. You bear the king's claiming mark on your left hip and his children in your womb. Corvin's voice gentled. May we come in? What I have to tell you cannot be spoken where others might hear. Children. He had said children, not child. Seren's grip on the poker trembled. How do you know about the mark? Because the king has described it in detail to every wolf in the realm, because he has not slept in 4 months, Because he is tearing apart everything he built to find the mate who vanished without a trace. Corvin paused. My lady, please, let me explain what truly happened that night. Against every instinct screaming at her to flee, Seren stepped aside. Corvin entered alone, leaving the guards at the door. He looked around her modest cottage, taking in the drying herbs, the simple furniture, the narrow bed where she had spent countless nights weeping into her pillow. He did not choose her, Corvin said quietly. Seraphina. He did not choose her willingly. Seren's knees nearly buckled. What? The night of the council meeting, someone poisoned the king's wine, a compound derived from moonsbane mixed with other substances we still have not fully identified. It suppressed his wolf entirely, severed his connection to his instincts and his bond. That is impossible, Seren whispered. We believe so too. Until the effects began wearing off the following morning and the king woke screaming your name. Corvin's voice hardened. He remembered nothing of the announcement, nothing of accepting Seraphina. The first thing he did was run to find you. And when your apartment was empty, he did not need to finish. Seren sank into the nearest chair, her mind reeling. Poisoned. He had been poisoned. The empty eyes, the mechanical movements, the complete absence of recognition. It had not been rejection at all. It had been violation. Who did this? She demanded. House Morthane. Seraphina's family. They have wanted their bloodline on the throne for 3 generations. With you gone and the king bound to their daughter by witnessed oath, they would have had everything. Corvin knelt before her chair. My lady, the king is not well. The damaged bond, the missing mate. His wolf has been fighting for dominance since the moment he regained his senses. If he does not find you soon, we fear he may go feral permanently. A wolf separated from its true mate for too long could lose itself entirely to the animal. And an AlphaKing, with power as vast as Kale's, would become something monstrous. I cannot go back, she heard herself say. Seraphina and her family will kill me. They will kill my children. Which is why I have not told the king exactly where you are. Corvin withdrew a folded letter from his coat. This was intercepted by our spies 3 days ago. Seren took the paper with numb fingers. The seal was broken, but she could see the Morthane crest pressed into the silver wax. The message inside was brief. The false mate has been located in the Eastern Territories. Elimination will occur before the next moon cycle. Long live Queen Seraphina. Seren felt as if the air had been driven from her lungs. Assassins, she breathed. Corvin nodded grimly. We intercepted this by chance. We do not know how many have been sent or how close they are. He reached for her hand. My lady, Kale will find you with or without my help. The bond is guiding him. Every day, he draws closer. As if to emphasize his words, Serene's mark flared with sudden heat. He feels that too, the beta said quietly. Every time your mark burns, he feels an answering fire. It is the only thing keeping him tethered to his humanity. Before Corvin could say more, a howl split the evening air. It came from the forest, close and filled with warning. The beta was on his feet instantly. They have found us. Who? Seren demanded, rising despite her trembling legs. Through her window she could see shapes moving between the trees. Not the dark-furred wolves who had watched her cottage earlier. These were different. Leaner, their movements coordinated with predatory precision. And leading them, stepping from the shadows with a crossbow raised, was a figure in black armor. The warrior moved with a lethal feminine grace, face hidden behind a silver mask shaped like a snarling wolf. The Morthane assassins had arrived. The first arrow shattered Seren's window before she could draw breath to scream. Corvin moved with supernatural speed, shoving her toward the back of the cottage as glass exploded across the floor. The 2 guards burst through the front door, already shifting mid-stride, their human forms dissolving into massive wolves that lunged toward the tree line. The cellar, Corvin commanded. Now. There is no way out from the cellar, Seren gasped. You only need to survive until the king arrives. He is close. I can feel him through the pack bond. Another arrow punched through the wooden wall, embedding itself inches from Serene's head. Dark liquid glistened on its tip. Poison. They are not trying to capture me, she realized aloud. They are trying to kill me quickly. Corvin's jaw tightened. The Morthanes cannot afford witnesses. He pulled a long dagger from his belt and pressed it into her hands. The blade is silver-edged. It will wound even a shifted wolf. Use it if you must. Before Seren could respond, a howl of pain erupted from outside. One of the guards, she realized. Then terrible silence. Corvin's eyes flickered amber, his wolf rising to the surface. Stay hidden. Whatever happens, do not emerge until you hear my voice, or the king's. Corvin! But he was already gone, his body exploding into wolf form as he crashed through the ruined window to join the battle. Seren stood frozen in her destroyed cottage, the silver dagger clutched in her trembling hands. Through the shattered glass, she could see shapes moving in the darkness, wolves clashing with wolves, the flash of blades, the sickening sound of flesh meeting steel. Her mark burned with renewed intensity, and she gasped at the sensation that accompanied it. He was closer now. Much closer. The bond between them pulsed with desperate urgency, and for the first time, Seren understood that she could feel his emotions bleeding through. Rage, so vast it threatened to consume everything. Fear, sharp and unfamiliar. And beneath it all, a longing so profound it made her eyes sting with tears. Through the window, she watched in horror as Corvin's wolf form was thrown against an oak tree with bone-cracking force. He struggled to rise, blood matting his silver-streaked fur, but 4 assassin wolves circled him with predatory patience. He was losing. Seren's gaze dropped to the cellar door. She could hide as Corvin had instructed, could wait in the darkness and pray that help arrived before the assassins found her. But Corvin would be dead by then, and she would be cowering underground while wolves died to protect her. No, she had spent 4 months running, 4 months hiding, 4 months letting fear dictate her every choice. Not anymore. Seren stepped through the shattered window into the chaos of battle. The effect was immediate. Every wolf in the clearing turned to stare at the pregnant woman who stood in the ruins of her home with nothing but a silver dagger and desperate courage. "Looking for me?" she called out, her voice steadier than she felt. "Here I am." The assassin wolves hesitated, their formation breaking as confusion warred with training. This was not how prey was supposed to behave. The masked leader raised her crossbow, taking aim at Seren's heart. "Foolish girl," a cold female voice hissed from behind the silver mask. "You should have stayed hidden. Now your death will be painful instead of quick." Seren's hand moved to her belly, shielding her children. "You will have to go through me first." "That," the assassin replied, "is precisely the point." The crossbow string sang. Seren closed her eyes, and then the forest exploded. Trees splintered like kindling as something massive crashed through the undergrowth. The ground shook with the force of its approach. The assassin wolves scattered in pure terror. The masked woman spun toward the sound, her crossbow swinging to track the new threat. She was not fast enough. A wolf the size of a warhorse burst from the tree line, its fur black as midnight and its eyes blazing with golden fire. It moved with a speed that defied physics, crossing the clearing in a single bound. Its jaws closed around the assassin's crossbow arm with a sickening crunch. The woman's scream was cut short as the massive wolf shook her like a rag doll, then flung her broken body into the darkness. It turned in a circle, searching for more threats, finding none. The remaining assassins had fled into the night. Then those burning golden eyes fixed on Seren. She could not move, could not breathe. could only stare at the creature that radiated power like heat from a bonfire. The wolf approached her slowly, each step deliberate. Blood dripped from its muzzle. Its massive body blocked out the moonlight. And yet, when it finally stood before her, it lowered its great head and pressed its nose gently to her belly. Both babies kicked, simultaneously, as if two small souls were responding to their father's presence. The wolf made a sound that was almost a whimper. "Kale," Seren whispered. The shift happened in the space between heartbeats. One moment, a wolf stood before her. The next, a man knelt in the blood-soaked grass, his hands hovering over her stomach as if afraid to touch her. He looked up, and Seren saw that the Alpha King was weeping. Seren had imagined this moment 1,000 times during her months of exile. She had imagined rage, imagined cold indifference, imagined him dragging her back to Valanthos in chains to face punishment for her disappearance. She had never imagined him on his knees before her, tears streaming down his face, his entire body trembling with barely contained emotion. "You are alive," Kale breathed. His voice was raw, broken, as if he had been screaming for months. "You are alive, and you are—" His eyes dropped to her swollen belly. His hand reached toward it, then stopped, hovering inches from her dress. "May I?" he asked. The question shattered something in Serene's chest. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in the realm, was asking permission to touch his own children. She took his hand and pressed it to her stomach. The babies kicked immediately, movements coming from two different places. Kale's eyes widened at the sensation, his palm flattening against her belly to feel more. "Children," he whispered. "Our children. Seren, why did you not tell me?" The question broke the spell. Seren stepped backward, pulling away from his touch. The warmth of the moment dissolved into the cold reality of everything that had happened. "Tell you?" Her voice came out sharper than she intended. "When would I have done that, Kale? Before or after you chose Seraphina in front of the entire kingdom?" Kale flinched as if she had struck him. "I did not choose her. I would never— I saw you." The words tore from her throat. "I was there. I watched you take her hand. I watched you stand before your court and declare that she would be your queen, while I hid behind a tapestry like some shameful secret." "Seren, please." Kyle rose to his feet, his hands reaching for her. "I was poisoned. Corvin told you. The Morthanes drugged me. I remember nothing of that night except waking the next morning and finding you gone." "How convenient," Seren spat, even as her heart cracked at the agony in his eyes. "Convenient?" Kyle's voice hardened. "You think any part of this has been convenient? I have spent 4 months hunting for you. 4 months fighting my wolf for control. 4 months watching my kingdom crumble while I tore apart every village, every forest, and every corner of the realm searching for the mate who vanished without a word. Because you rejected me. Because I was violated." The roar shook the clearing. The word hung between them, terrible and true. "Do you think I chose this? Do you think I wanted to wake up bound to a woman I despise while the woman I love was gone? While our bond was screaming in my chest and I had no idea where you were, or if you were even alive?" His voice cracked on the last word, and Seren saw something in his eyes that she had never expected to see. Vulnerability. Raw, desperate vulnerability from the most powerful wolf in the realm. Seren's anger faltered. The bond. She had felt it too. Every day of her exile. The burning mark that should have faded but never did. The ache that followed her into sleep and greeted her upon waking. The sense of him searching, always searching, like a distant lighthouse she could never quite reach. "I thought you had thrown me away," she whispered. "I thought everything you said was a lie, that I was just a convenient distraction until you were forced to choose someone worthy of your crown." Kyle closed the distance between them in 2 strides. His hands cupped her face, tilting it up until she had no choice but to meet his gaze. "You are worthy of everything," he said fiercely. "You are my mate. My true mate. The bond recognized you before I even knew your name. Do you think I would give that up for politics? For power? For anything in this world or any other?" A sob escaped Seren's throat. She had held the grief inside for so long, had built walls around her broken heart to keep functioning. But now, with his hands on her face and his words cracking through her defenses, those walls were crumbling. "See, I waited for you," she choked out. "That night. I waited behind that tapestry for you to call my name. I was going to stand beside you. I was going to tell you about the babies after." Kale's expression shattered. "Seren. And when you chose her instead, I ran. I ran because staying would have destroyed me." She pounded her fist against his chest, but there was no strength behind the blow. "Do you know what that felt like? To be humiliated and abandoned twice? First by a stranger at a restaurant, and then by the man who swore I was his entire world?" Kale caught her wrist and pressed her palm flat against his heart. "Yes," he said quietly. "I know exactly what it felt like. Because I have spent every moment since that night living with the knowledge that I failed you, that something was done to me that made me betray the most important person in my existence." His heartbeat thundered beneath her hand, strong and steady and achingly familiar. "I have not touched Serafina," Kale continued. "I have not even been in the same room as her since I regained my senses. The council is threatening rebellion. Half the noble houses have withdrawn their support." He laughed bitterly. "They think I have gone mad, Seren, and perhaps I have. But I would burn this kingdom to ashes before I let anyone but you sit beside me on that throne." The mark on her hip flared with warmth, and she felt his answering pulse through the bond. His claim on her, incomplete as it was, resonated with something deep in her soul. "The Morthanes sent assassins," she heard herself say. "They want me dead." Kale's eyes hardened to molten gold. "Then the Morthanes will learn what happens to those who threaten my mate." He leaned down and pressed his forehead to hers. "I love you," he whispered. "I have loved you since the moment I rose from that table at the Amber Vine. I will love you until the stars burn out and the moons fall from the sky. Please, Seren, come home with me. Let me make this right." Seren looked into his golden eyes, those eyes that had haunted her dreams for 4 months, and felt the last of her resistance crumble. "Together?" she asked quietly. "Always, my heart. From this moment until my last breath. Together." When his lips found hers, the bond between them roared to life with a force that stole her breath away. The journey to Volanthos should have taken 4 days. Kyle's wolves made it in 2. Seren rode before the AlphaKing on his massive black stallion, his arm wrapped securely around her waist, his body shielding her from the biting wind. She had protested at first, but Kale had simply lifted her onto his saddle and silenced her objections with a look that brooked no argument. "My wolf needs you close," he had said, his voice rough with emotion. 4 months of separation nearly destroyed us both. I will not let you out of my sight until the bond is completed and every threat to your safety is eliminated." So Seren had relented, leaning back against his chest and feeling his heartbeat against her spine. The babies seemed to approve of the arrangement, settling into peaceful stillness for the first time in weeks. As they rode through the night, Kale told her everything. He told her about waking from the drugged haze to find Serafina in his chambers, attempting to consummate a union he had no memory of agreeing to. About the horror that had flooded through him when he realized what had been done. About throwing her from his rooms and ordering her confined pending investigation. He told her about the search that had consumed every waking moment since. The wolves sent to every corner of the kingdom. The sleepless nights spent poring over maps and reports. The way his control had frayed with each passing day until his own advisors feared to be in the same room with him. "My wolf knew you were alive," he murmured against her hair. "The bond never broke. Not truly. Every time I tried to accept that you might be gone forever, I would feel a pulse of warmth from the mark I gave you. And I knew. I knew you were out there somewhere, waiting for me to find you." Serene's hand moved to cover his where it rested on her belly. I felt it too. The burn that never faded. The dreams that felt more real than waking. Kyle stiffened behind her. "You dreamed of me?" "Every night. You came to me in moonlit forests. You spoke to me in words I could somehow understand. You told me you loved me, that you would find me, and that nothing would keep us apart." "Those were not dreams." Kyle's voice was hoarse. "My wolf. When I slept, he would reach for you through the bond. I thought I was only imagining it, but if you actually felt—" He trailed off, overcome. Serene turned in the saddle to look at him. In the silver moonlight she could see the shadows under his eyes, the gauntness of his cheeks, the evidence of months of suffering etched into every line of his face. "We have both been through so much," she whispered, "apart when we should have been together." Kale's hand came up to cup her face. "Never again," he vowed. "Whatever comes next, we face it as one." He leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, tender and questioning. But when Serene's hand curled around the back of his neck, pulling him closer, something ignited between them. The bond roared with renewed strength. Seren gasped against his mouth as sensation flooded through her. His emotions crashed into hers with overwhelming force. Love, desperate and all-consuming, desire, barely held in check. And beneath it all, a fierce protectiveness that wrapped around her like armor. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kale's eyes were blazing gold. "Soon," he promised, his voice rough with restrained need. "When you are safe, when our enemies are destroyed, I will complete the bond properly and you will never doubt my devotion again." They reached the outskirts of Valanthos as dawn painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. The capital city spread before them, its ancient spires reaching toward the heavens. But something was wrong. Smoke rose from several quarters of the city. The distant sound of shouting reached their ears. And on the great banner that flew above the castle gates, the royal crest had been replaced by the silver serpent of House Morthane. "No," Corvin breathed from behind them. "They would not dare." Kale's arm tightened around Seren as a growl built in his chest. "They have taken the castle." "How is that possible?" Seren demanded. "You have been gone only 2 days. The Morthanes have been planning this for years. Perhaps decades. They did not just want me to marry Seraphina. They wanted to replace me entirely." A rider emerged from the city gates, galloping toward them at reckless speed. One of Kale's scouts, his face ashen with fear. "My king," he gasped. "The Morthanes struck at midnight. They had allies within the guard. Lord Valdric Morthane has declared himself regent, claiming you have gone feral and are unfit to rule. Lady Seraphina has been named queen." A snarl tore from Kale's throat. "There is more." The scout's voice trembled. "They have taken hostages, the servants who remained loyal to you, the guards who refused to bend the knee. They are to be executed at midday as traitors. All 43 of them." A chill raced through Seren's veins. "Including the old woman from the apothecary district," the scout continued. "The one they say helped Lady Seren during her time at the capital. Mira, her sister." The name struck Seren like a physical blow. Mira, who had arranged the blind date that led to everything. Who had visited her apartment the morning before she fled and found it empty. Who must have spent 4 months wondering if her sister was alive or dead. "We have to save them," Seren said fiercely. Kale looked down at her. "Seren, you cannot enter that city. If the Morthanes capture you, if we do nothing, 43 innocent people die, including my sister. Seren met his gaze without flinching. I will not have their blood on my hands, Kale. I will not let Mira die because she once tried to help me find happiness. For a long moment the Alpha King was silent. Then, slowly, a fierce smile spread across his face. My queen, he murmured. Even now, you think of others before yourself. He turned to address the army of wolves assembled behind them. The Morthanes believe they have won. They believe their treachery has succeeded, that their false queen sits secure upon a stolen throne. His eyes blazed with golden fire. They are wrong. A howl rose from the assembled wolves, hundreds of voices joining in a chorus of fury and loyalty. Today, we take back what is ours. Today, we show the traitors what happens to those who threaten our king, our true queen, and the heirs she carries. The army surged forward, a tide of fur and fang and righteous rage. And at its head, with his mate held close against his heart, the Alpha King rode to reclaim his throne. The battle for Volanthos was brutal and swift. The Morthanes had expected resistance. They had not expected an army of wolves driven by 4 months of rage and the primal need to protect their king's mate and unborn heirs. Seren watched from a protected position on the hillside as Kale led the charge. Even from this distance she could feel his fury through the bond, a blazing inferno that scorched through her veins. His wolf form was terrible to behold, a shadow of death that tore through the Morthane defenders like parchment. Within an hour, the outer walls had fallen. Within 2, the castle gates lay in splinters. But as the sun climbed toward its midday peak, a messenger came running with news that made Seren's heart seize. My lady, Lord Valdric has barricaded himself in the great hall with the hostages. He says if the king does not surrender himself, he will execute them all. Starting with your sister. Seren was moving before she consciously decided to, ignoring the protests of the guards Kale had left to protect her. Her body ached from the journey, her back screaming with the strain of carrying twins, but none of that mattered. She had to reach the great hall. The castle corridors were chaos. Bodies of fallen wolves littered the stone floors. The scent of blood hung thick in the air. But Seren pushed through it all, following the pull of the bond toward where she knew Kale would be. She found him at the doors of the great hall, held back by Corvin and 3 other wolves. You cannot go in there, Corvin was saying. It is exactly what Valdric wants. If I do nothing, innocent people die, Kale replied, his voice ragged. Seren pushed through the guards. Kale. He spun at the sound of her voice. Seren, what are you doing here? I told you to stay. I know what you told me. She stopped before him, tilting her chin up defiantly. And I am telling you that I will not hide while others die in my place. This is not your fight. It became my fight the moment the Morthanes decided I was an obstacle to their ambitions. Seren placed her hand on his chest. And it became my fight the moment I fell in love with you. Kale's breath caught. I love you, she said. I loved you when I thought you had betrayed me. I loved you through 4 months of exile and heartbreak. And I will not let that love make me a coward now. She turned toward the great hall doors before he could respond. Lord Valdric, she called out. I am Seren, the woman your family has tried so hard to destroy. I am coming in. Alone. Seren, no. Kale grabbed her arm. She looked back at him. Trust me, please. Something passed between them through the bond. Not words, but understanding. Faith. And beneath it all, a desperate prayer. Kale released her arm. Seren pushed open the doors and stepped into the great hall. The scene inside was worse than she had imagined. 43 hostages knelt in a line before the raised dais, their hands bound, and their faces pale with terror. Armed Morthane soldiers stood behind them with blades drawn. And on the throne that should have belonged to Kale sat Lord Valdric Morthane, his silver hair gleaming in the torchlight, his cruel eyes fixed on her with predatory interest. Beside him stood Seraphina. "So the little merchant girl finally shows herself," Seraphina said, her lip curling with disdain. "A pregnant nobody who somehow bewitched a king. How pathetic." Seren ignored her, her gaze finding Mira among the hostages. Her sister's eyes widened with shock, then flooded with tears. "Seren? You are alive? Run, please, run while you can." "I am done running." Seren turned to face Lord Valdric. "You want the king to surrender. I am offering you something better." Valdric's eyebrow rose. "And what might that be?" "Me." Seren placed her hand on her belly. "The king's mate and his unborn heirs. Take me as your hostage instead. Release the others." "No!" The roar came from beyond the doors. Kale's anguish tore through the bond like shattered glass. But Valdric was smiling. "An interesting proposition. The true prize, delivering herself willingly." He stroked his chin. "Very well. I accept." "Father, wait," Seraphina interjected. "We should simply kill her now and be done with it." "Patience, daughter. A dead hostage has no value. A living one, especially one carrying the royal heirs." Valdric's smile widened into something monstrous. "Guards, release the prisoners. Secure the girl." The hostages were cut free, stumbling toward the doors in confused relief. Mira tried to reach Seren, but soldiers pushed her back with the others. "Go," Seren told her sister. "I will be all right." It was a lie, and they both knew it. As rough hands grabbed Seren's arms, she felt strangely calm. The bond with Kale pulsed with his panic, his rage, his desperate need to reach her. But beneath all of that, she could feel something else, the babies, stirring within her, and with them, a power she had never known existed. Something ancient, something vast, something that had been sleeping inside her bloodline for generations, waiting for this moment to awaken. "Now then," Valdric said, rising from the stolen throne. He drew a sword that gleamed with an unnatural silver sheen, moon's bane-coated steel. "Let us end this farce once and for all." He descended the dais steps, the poisoned blade held loosely at his side. "You see, little merchant girl, you were never meant to survive this long. A true mate bond appearing after 300 years of silence? The elders thought it was a blessing." He laughed coldly. "We knew it was a threat." Seren's eyes widened. "You knew, before the council meeting. You knew about the bond." "Of course we knew. We have had spies in the palace for decades. The moment Kale marked you, we began preparing." Valdric raised the sword, examining its edge. "The moonsbane that suppressed his wolf at the announcement? That was merely the beginning. You were supposed to be eliminated that same night. But you ran before our assassins could reach you." 4 months, Seraphina added, moving to stand beside her father. 4 months of hunting you across 3 kingdoms while my idiot betrothed tore apart everything searching. Do you know how tedious that has been?" Valdric pressed the tip of his blade beneath Seren's chin, forcing her head up. "But now," he said softly, "the hunt is over." He raised the sword for the killing blow, and Seren's children chose that moment to protect their mother. Power exploded from her womb. Golden light, pure and blinding, erupted from Seren's belly and slammed into Valdric with the force of a thunderbolt. The Lord flew backward, crashing into the throne with a crack of splintering wood. The moonsbane sword clattered across the marble floor. Seraphina screamed, stumbling away from the radiance that poured from Seren's body. But the power did not stop there. Pain tore through Seren as bones began to shift, muscles stretched, skin rippled with the emergence of silver-white fur. She was transforming, the change she had never been able to complete. The wolf that had remained dormant inside her for 24 years was finally awakening. And it was awakening because her children, even unborn, carried power that defied everything the world thought it knew about bloodlines and bonds. Seren threw back her head and screamed as her body remade itself. The great hall doors exploded inward. Kale burst through in full wolf form, his massive black body hurtling toward her even as her own body tore itself apart. His howl shook the rafters, a sound of pure anguish and protective fury. Morthane's soldiers rushed to intercept him. Seraphina shouted orders. Chaos erupted on every side, but Seren was beyond noticing any of it. Her transformation completed in a surge of golden fire. Where a pregnant woman had stood, a wolf now crouched. Her fur was the color of starlight, her eyes blazing with amber flames that matched her mate's. She was smaller than Kale's massive form, but no less magnificent, and she was furious. Valdric had risen from the ruins of the throne, blood streaming down his face. He lunged for the fallen Moonsbane sword. Seren moved faster. Her jaws closed around his wrist before his fingers could touch the hilt. She bit down with all the strength her newborn wolf possessed. Valdric screamed as bones shattered. Seren flung him aside and turned to face Seraphina, who stood frozen with terror. "You tried to take everything from me." Seren's voice echoed through the bond, and somehow, impossibly, everyone in the hall could hear it. "My mate, my children, my very existence. Now you will answer for your crimes." Seraphina tried to run. She made it 3 steps before Kale's massive form blocked her path. His golden eyes burned with the same terrible fury that blazed in Seren's. The remaining Morthane soldiers threw down their weapons and fell to their knees in surrender. The battle was over. Kale shifted back to human form, his naked chest heaving with exertion. He crossed the hall to where Seren still stood in wolf form, her silver fur matted with Valdric's blood. "My love," he said softly, kneeling before her. "My brave, impossible love. Can you shift back?" Seren felt the change ripple through her, easier this time. Between one breath and the next, she was human again, collapsed in Kale's arms with tears streaming down her face. "I did it," she gasped. "I finally—" "You were magnificent." Kale pressed kisses to her hair, her cheeks, her lips. "You were everything. My queen, my warrior, the mother of miracles." His hand found her belly, and to both their amazement, the babies kicked strongly beneath his palm. "They saved us," Seren whispered. "Our children. They protected me when I could not protect myself." Kale's eyes glistened. "Of course they did. They are their mother's children." Corvin's voice cut through the moment. "My king. Lord Valdric and Lady Seraphina await your judgment." Kale rose, helping Seren to her feet. Together, they faced the defeated Morthanes. "Valdric of House Morthane," Kale announced, his voice ringing through the hall. "You are charged with treason, attempted regicide, conspiracy against the crown, and attempted murder of the true queen and heirs of Valanthos. The sentence is death." Valdric spat blood at their feet. "You will regret this, boy. Other houses will rise. You cannot—" "Silence him," Kyle commanded. Guards dragged the lord away, his threats dissolving into muffled fury. Kale turned to Seraphina, who had fallen to her knees, weeping. "Please," she begged. "I was only following my father's orders. I never wanted—" "You wanted a crown that was never yours to claim." Kale's voice was ice. "You participated in poisoning your king, conspired to murder his true mate, and attempted to steal his throne. You will be stripped of your name and your wolf. You will be exiled to the frozen wastelands beyond the northern border. And you will live out your days knowing that everything you schemed for has turned to ash." Seraphina's screams echoed through the great hall as guards dragged her away. Then there was silence. Kyle turned to Seren, and the hardness in his expression melted into something soft, something reverent. "My queen," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Will you stand beside me and help me heal what has been broken?" Seren took his hand. "Always." The moon hung full and heavy over Valanthos as Kale led Seren to the royal chambers. The kingdom was beginning to heal. The Morthane loyalists had been rounded up and were awaiting trial. The hostages had been reunited with their families, including Mira, who had not stopped crying since embracing her sister in the Great Hall. The damage to the city was being repaired, and the people were emerging from their homes with hope renewed. But one final piece remained incomplete. The bond, Kale said softly, closing the chamber doors behind them. It needs to be finished, properly, if you will have me. Seren looked at the man who had risen from a restaurant table to defend her honor, the king who had torn apart his kingdom to find her, the wolf who had faced down assassins and traitors, and his own counsel for the chance to love her. I will have you, she said. I have always been yours, Kale, from the moment we met. He crossed to her in 2 strides and cupped her face in his hands. Then claim me, he whispered. Make it complete. He tilted his head, baring his throat to her in the ancient gesture of a wolf offering himself to his mate. Seren understood instinctively what to do. Her wolf rose within her, no longer dormant, guiding her movements as she pressed her lips to the spot where his neck met his shoulder. Her teeth sank into his flesh. The bond exploded between them. It was not pain, it was completion. 2 halves of a single soul finally becoming whole. Seren felt Kale's essence pour into her as hers flowed into him. Every memory, every emotion, every secret corner of their hearts laid bare to each other. She saw the night of the blind date through his eyes, how he had noticed her the moment she entered the amber vine, the way the candlelight caught her hair, the nervous hope in her expression. How his wolf had surged forward with a recognition so powerful it had nearly driven him to his knees. How watching Dorian humiliate her had filled him with a rage so vast he could barely contain his shift. She felt his devastation when he had woken from the moon's bane haze. The horror of finding Seraphina in his chambers. The soul-deep wrongness of knowing something had been taken from him that he could not name. And then the memory of her, crashing through the fog like sunlight through storm clouds, and the screaming, clawing need to find her that had consumed every moment since. She saw herself through his eyes. Not a rejected merchant's daughter, not an unclaimed female, not a nobody, but a woman of extraordinary courage and compassion, a healer who had captivated a king with her kindness and fierce spirit, the mother of his children, his fated mate, chosen by destiny itself, the most precious soul in his entire existence. And he saw himself through hers. Not a king who had failed her, but a man who had fought against impossible odds to find her, who had torn his kingdom apart rather than accept a false mate, who loved her with a ferocity that transcended poison and politics and even death itself. When Seren finally released him, they were both trembling. My queen, Kale breathed, pressing his forehead to hers. My king, she answered. Outside their window, wolves across the capital lifted their voices in a howl of joy. In the months that followed, Volanthos flourished as it had not in generations. The true mate bond between the Alpha King and his queen radiated peace and stability throughout the realm. Crops that had withered under the weight of Kale's suffering grew abundant. Wolves who had turned feral returned to their senses. The noble houses that had wavered in their loyalty fell over themselves to pledge allegiance to the royal couple. Seren took to her role as queen with a natural grace that surprised everyone except Kael. She established healing houses throughout the kingdom, ensuring that even the poorest citizens had access to medical care. She advocated for the merchant class, building bridges between the nobility and the commoners who had always been overlooked. And she never forgot the lesson of her blind date, that a person's worth was not determined by their bloodline or their status, but by the content of their heart. And on a warm evening, as summer melted into autumn, Queen Seren of Volanthos gave birth to twins, a boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's healing gift, who would one day become the greatest alpha the kingdom had ever known. a girl with silver-white fur when she shifted and eyes that already gleamed with amber fire, who would grow to be a warrior queen in her own right. Kale held his children with tears streaming down his face, his massive warrior's hands impossibly gentle. "Thank you," he whispered to Seren, who lay exhausted but radiant in their bed. "For fighting for us. For believing in us. Even when I gave you every reason not to." Seren reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the claiming mark on his throat. The mark that matched the one on her hip. Both now healed into beautiful silver scars that proclaimed their bond to all who saw them. "I never stopped believing," she said softly. "Even in the darkest moments, something inside me knew. We were always meant to find our way back to each other." Kale leaned down to kiss her, their children nestled safely between them. "Always," he agreed. "In this life and every life that follows. You are my heart, Seren. My mate. My home." Outside their window, the wolves of Valanthos lifted their voices in a howl of celebration. And in the great tapestry of the kingdom's history, a new chapter was woven. The story of a woman humiliated on a blind date who found her destiny in the eyes of a king. Of an alpha who rose from a restaurant table and changed the course of both their lives. Of a bond that could not be broken by poison or politics, or even the cruelest twists of fate. They had found each other against all odds, and they would never be parted again. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.